Hello and welcome to today's video. This is my March wrap up. I'm going to just talk about all the books that I read during March. I actually somehow ended up reading 18 books in March, which was a total of 6,319 pages, so a lot. I'm really happy with that. It was a much better reading month than I remember it being, to be quite honest. So here is a big stack of books, and I believe there were also 3 books that I don't own physically that I read as well. So yeah, I will do a few statistics. I'll put these down, do a few statistics, and then we'll get into talking about them individually. I'll give you my star rating and my basic thoughts on them. Any particular pros, any particular cons, if I enjoyed it, why you might enjoy it too, if I didn't like it, like things I didn't like but like maybe you will like and end up enjoying it. Yeah, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna put these down and then let's talk. Someone's just started mowing their lawn. Okay, so the mowing has stopped, but I now have 10 minutes until school's finished for the day, and the road normally gets pretty trafficky at that sort of time, so keeping my fingers crossed we can get through this without any more interruptions. So a few statistics. This month I read 13 fantasy books, 2 mythology books, 2 classic books and 1 biography. I read 3 books as an ebook, 2 books as physical books, 4 books as audiobooks and 9 books as a mixture of them, most likely physical and audio. I read 13 adult books, 3 new adult books and 2 young adult books. And as for star ratings, I've given out 1 1.5 stars, 2 2.5 stars, 2 3 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 7 4, I don't know, I don't have 7 fingers, 7 4 stars, 1 4.5 star and 2 5 stars. So yeah, those are the statisticky bits and pieces. My favourite book that I read for the month was the 3rd book that we'll talk about, so I will mention that there. Let's get on to the books. The first 2 books that I read I don't own physically. This was Lore Olympus Volume 4 and Lore Olympus Volume 5. I'm going to talk about them together because basically I finished my physical copy of Volume 3 and then I downloaded Webtoon and I basically just read for a long time. The amount of chapters that are in Volume 4 I surpassed, and I surpassed more than like double that. So I read Volume 5 as well, but I couldn't see online at the time how many chapters were in Volume 5, but essentially I've read at least those 2 if not more, and I'm going to give them both 4 stars. Both Volume 4 and Volume 5, they're difficult to distinguish between when you're reading them online like as the Webtoon, but they're all really good. I had a fun time, I enjoyed them, I enjoyed the story. I love the artwork in these books, like the way that the colours are so pivotal to what's going on, and like you can tell so much and tell so much about characters just by the colours that you see in. I think it's really fun, I really have a good time with it. So yeah, 4 stars. Easy peasy. So then the 3rd book that I read this month I gave 5 stars, and this is my favourite book of March, and that was Last Violent Call. I feel like I've spoken about this a fair bit already, but just for this video let's just pretend you don't know anything about it. This is a short story collection that contains 2 short stories in this fantasy Shanghai world that Chloe Gong has created. To read this book you need to have read both of These Violent Delights duology and the first book in the Foul Lady Fortune duology. If you read this book without reading those 3 books you will get spoilt for a lot of things, so you can't go into this one without having read the previous. It's just not going to work. And to be honest, I also think if you haven't read both of those previous books you're not going to get the same enjoyment out of this either, so I would recommend doing it like that. But it was great, it was so good. The scale of the stories and the kind of like problems that we faced were reduced for this, but they were short stories, you know, like this contains 2 stories, so roughly speaking, well I can tell you how many pages the first one was. The first story is 117 pages and I feel like the second one is around the same as well, so you really pack in a lot in. Obviously I don't want to go into spoilers, and like in my reading journal I wrote out how I feel in a spoiler way, so I am going to try my best to very quickly go through this and not tell spoilers. So so for the first one, a foul thing. No, like honestly, I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you anything without potentially spoiling other books if you haven't read the 3 books before this. And I don't want to risk that. I don't like spoilers. I don't like being spoiled about things. So yeah, it was 5 stars. It was amazing. The stories were perfect. I enjoyed all the characters we got to see. I enjoyed the 2 different storylines. And I enjoyed where they've kind of set us up to continue going in the second of the Fair Lady Fortune duology. That's all I can say. That's all I can say right now. Then I read a book series on Scribd. I listened to these as audiobooks but really enjoyed them, and these are the Blood Mafia series. So I read Blood Owed, Blood Taken and Blood Bound. I read all 3 of these. They're just as a audiobook on Scribd. You can listen to all 3 in the same audiobook, and they're really good. Books 1 and book 2, which is Blood Owed and Blood Taken, okay, 4 stars. Really enjoyed them, had a fun time. Book 3 I didn't think was as good. I gave that 3.5 stars. I still enjoyed it. It was still fun, but it wasn't quite to the same thing. Yeah, so I don't have much to say about any of these. They're a fun time. They're like fantasy romance. I was listening to them before bed as like a nice easy read, so there's not much to say. Book 1, really enjoyed how the story was set up, enjoyed all of the characters and enjoyed the multiple POVs. Like the way that the multiple POVs was set up just worked really well. In book 2 we got more character development, and we also got to see more of the like hunter side of things and how that worked and how that was all coming together. It was a fun time, and it left me feeling like there was a lot of promise for where the book was going. And then obviously, having said that, book 3, it was just a bit disappointing, honestly. There were some shocking events that happened, some big major things, and I realised I didn't actually care. They weren't impacting me, they weren't making me worried, they weren't making me shocked, they weren't making me feel anything. And none of these things were happening to our like main character. But in this one I realised how I hadn't, although the characters were fun and I liked them and liked their point of views and liked the like wider characters that we didn't get point of views from, but there was quite a big circle of like secondary characters too. But in this one it just made me feel like in my mind they are actually all expendable. Yeah, they didn't actually all need to be there. Like I wasn't worried if one of them was getting injured or dying or whatever. Like, yeah, just disappointed. Then we have this book. This is The Crucible by Arthur Miller, and this is the book that I gave 1.5 stars to. I really did not like this. This was really not the vibe. It didn't pass. It wasn't it. I had quite a few problems reading this, and I don't know how diplomatic to be because I don't have my Goodreads in front of me. I do these videos just using my like book journal, and I don't write with any sort of like filter when I write down my own thoughts. So diplomatically ish, this is written as a play. It's not that long of a play, but it felt really long. Like it felt like it was taking days and days and hours and hours, and honestly it did because I read it over such a long time. It's only 127 pages. It's really not long, but it felt so long. It dragged and it was boring, honestly. My main problem with this is the story itself wasn't bad. There was so much that I was like, so much could be being done with this. We could really feel this. We could really feel impacted by this. I don't think that the play format for this worked. I feel like this could have been a 30-40 page like novella short story thing and have been wrote in like, you know, a novel format rather than a play format, and it could have really impacted me so much more. But yeah, I found myself bored. Have I read anything else here that is not spoilers? I found it really boring, even though the subject matter of it meant that it really shouldn't be. The writing was incredibly dull and unnecessarily long-winded. Everything else I've read is spoilers, but yeah, that's what I thought of that one. It's an unpopular opinion, it's super popular online, but didn't vibe with me. Then I read A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I gave this 2.5 stars. My main problem with this is still marketed as a feminist text. This is still marketed as a feminist book. It is not. Like honestly, maybe it was in the time it was written. Maybe this was the peak of feminism, the absolute amazing thing in the time this was written. But by today's standards, by what it really truly means, by, you know, not just supporting the white people with money who can afford to educate themselves, you know, if you only care about the fact that, you know, if you have a lot of money you should be able to pay to educate yourself as a woman. If you don't care about the fact that, you know, education should be for all women, like, I'm not going to say much about this. I haven't even wrote much in my review of it because honestly it just made me angry. And I think it was the approach to this. If this hadn't have been marketed as a feminist text, if this was just one rich woman in, I don't even know when this was first published, like 1928. One rich woman in an academic setting in 1928 explores her thoughts and feelings. Fine, it could have been interesting, I could have gone with it, I could have found something to look at, but yeah, let's leave it like that. Let's leave it like that. I know a lot of people love it. I know a lot of people, it's like this amazing book. I did not think so. Next book I read was The War of Two Queens. This is book 4 of the From Blood and Ash series, and I gave it 4 stars. It was alright. It's pretty good. I enjoy this series. I do see it as more of just like a chill little fantasy romance series that I'm reading. I like our characters, I like how it's going. It's extremely repetitive, and honestly I don't think this series is working as well anymore. Now that we've got the prequel series, which I will talk about in a moment because, spoiler, I read one of those. There was a lot going on in here, and I found myself caring more about the odd character that I knew from the prequel series than I did the characters from this one. Yeah. The pacing also didn't really work for me. The pacing just seemed to keep changing. Yeah, I don't know. I wrote down here that the pacing in this one seemed better than the pacing in books 2 and 3, so maybe it's improving. I'm trying to think of a way to word this without it being spoilery. There is one big plot point that kind of towards the last third of the book, we have this thing, we need to know this thing, this information we need to know. The main character needs to know this information. Well, if you read these books in publication order and like read the first book of the prequel series before this one, you have to read and know that information. Like, that information is not secretive, that information is nothing big, it's nothing new, you just know it. And I find that really annoying, honestly, just annoying. I still enjoyed it, it was still 4 stars, like it was fine, I just didn't do anything special. However, book 2 of the prequel series is annoyingly a super large paperback, but unannoyingly I gave it 5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. So this is a Flesh and Fire novel. This is book 2 and it's called A Light in the Flame. This is so good. I like our characters in this one so much more. Both like the main characters as like the romantic aspect, obviously it is a fantasy romance, but also the friendships in this. The amount of characters that we get to see and the amount of characters we get to see interact with each other. The like Draken in this. I really hope I'm saying that right. Everything, it just worked really well. I can't say a lot about it because it's the second book in a series. I will say the only negatives are in this. There were a couple of close calls. There were, I don't think this is a spoiler because you're reading the books in order, right? If you're only reading the prequel series, maybe this is a spoiler, maybe skip forward 20 seconds. But because of reading not just the prequel series but the original series, there are a couple close calls with characters with like injuries or close to death, but because I'd seen those characters in the other series, it kind of took away that factor as like, oh shit, what's actually going to happen, because I'd seen them, they weren't going to die or they were going to be okay in some way or another. Like it didn't have that same impact in a couple of places because of seeing those characters later on in the other series. So yeah, that was the only downside of this one for me. Then we have this book here. This is The Luminaries. This is book 1 of a new series. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay, like don't get me wrong, it was okay, but I feel like the problem is with YA covers such a vast age range, and this was very much younger end of YA. Everything in this was extremely obvious. I knew what was going to happen, I knew what was happening, and that's not always a bad thing, but it was consistent. There were so many like common tropes, common things going on. I just didn't find myself that interested in it. I did read this along with the audiobook, and the audiobook made it easier. Like honestly, I don't know if I'd have kept picking it up if I wasn't reading the audiobook, because there was nothing grasping my attention, there was nothing I was intrigued by throughout this. And the other thing that didn't work for me, which I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, like I can't figure it out, I couldn't figure it out during it. Our main character in this, I believe he's meant to be 16, but reads a lot younger than that. Like the decisions and the thoughts that they're having, they read a lot younger than that. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, because the main character is like behind in their training, like they've been held back, not in terms of because they were bad, but yeah, it's part of the story. They've been held back some years, but the training that it's on about is like a physical training. The character's still been going to school. I don't know. I couldn't tell if the character was intentionally reading super young or if it was unintentional and just annoying me. So yeah, it was fun. It was fine. Like, it's a YA fantasy. I would say it is younger end of YA. I still really enjoy YA. Like, my favourite book of the month is a YA book, you know. That's Violent Core, that's YA. But that's an older YA. This is younger. And I don't know, I'm struggling because with this age range now, you don't know what you're going to get until you go into it. And unfortunately, sometimes it's not seeming worth it to try anymore, I'm finding. I really wish that we had 2 separate age categories within YA for like older and younger. Because I'm sure lots of people would love this. Like, if you haven't read many fantasies, if you haven't really explored that yet, if you are younger, I think this could be fun. I think people could enjoy it, but it really wasn't for me. It didn't really work. Okay, these next 5 I'm kind of going to do together, but I will talk about a little bit separately. I read the first 5 books of the Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh. What does I say about it? I don't know, are they fantasy romance or paranormal romance? I'm not sure. They are angels, archangels and vampires. Not sure really where that falls, but those are the books. I've been really enjoying the series. Book 1, Angel's Blood, I gave 4 stars. Book 2, Angel's Kiss, I gave 3.5 stars. Book 3, Archangel's Consort, I gave 3.5 stars. Book 4, Archangel's Blade, I gave 4.5 stars. And book 5, which is Archangel's Storm, I gave 4 stars. Book 1 was a really strong start and a really good introduction to these characters. I really enjoyed them, and I enjoyed not only the main characters but the amount that we got to see of side characters and got to see of side people. Now, books 2 and 3 also continue to follow the 2 main characters that are in book 1 as the main point of views throughout these 2 as well. And the story there is really good. I will say book 2 wasn't quite as good for me. It was much more like training based rather than like a story based, but it was still really fun. I still had a good time. And it's a really interesting world. We essentially have like archangels, there's 10 of them, and they have like split the world into 10 and they like control that section of it. And we have hunters who hunt down like angels or vampires who aren't following the control properly. And in these first 3 books we follow an guild hunter, Elena, and an archangel, Raphael. Many things happen, many things are going on. And even though this is a romance book, the storyline for the plot is equally as important. Like, this really seems to have like a really good mix for me. I would say it's kind of like 40% romance, 60% plot, but they both impact each other in quite important ways, and I really enjoyed them. I really enjoyed the first 3. Then book 4, which is the one that's actually got the highest rating so far. This is, I won't say names for the rest of it because don't want to potentially spoil, people come close to dying, whatever, but this one follows a vampire and a guild hunter. It continues on the story, but just from different perspectives. It was really, really fun. I didn't expect to like this book as much as I did, and honestly I feel like it could have got 5 stars. A trope happened in this book that I won't say because it could spoil it, but it's a trope that I figured out I don't like. I don't like. I feel like it kind of ruins a lot of like momentum for me and a lot of like character and like how you feel about characters and character development, and it happened in this, and I still gave it 4.5 stars, which to me tells me it's pretty damn good. And then this one follows 2 angels from different courts, and what was interesting about this one was no longer just 2 point of views. This one had added perspectives that we'd previously seen in the other books, and it took me a moment to get used to, but once I got used to it, it was really good. And I like the backstory the most in this one. One of the main angels in this one we'd seen in previous books, and their backstory had really been hinted to quite a bit, and in this one we got to explore that, which I found really, really fun. So yeah. Okay, and then 2 more books to go. I read Deadly Dreams. I'll pop an image in here. This is book 3 of the Fortuna Sworn series, and I gave this one 3 stars. It really went downhill for me from the first 2. I did enjoy this one very much. By the end of it I pretty much hated everyone, and it just didn't work. Like honestly, it just didn't work for me. I do think that the intention was to dislike people and have all these issues and see all these problems, but it wasn't working for me. There was a lot that went on. Honestly, I read this, it probably took me 6 weeks to read this book in total. Like I finished it almost last of the month because I was like, if I don't finish it this month, I'm not going to. But yeah, it was fine. I'm still going to read book 4 of the series, but I really hope that book 4 kind of like picks up the pace and shows us a bit more of what's going on, because yeah, it has kind of worried me. Book 1 was strong, book 2 went down a bit, book 3 went down even more for me, and like obviously book 3 is the one that I'm talking about now. Book 3 is the one that I read this month. I believe 0% of the romance in this. This is another fantasy romance I'm reading. We've got a nightmare and a fae. I don't believe it, but by the end of this one I believe in 0 of the romantic aspects of it. And the plot also isn't there. All of the plot that we kind of saw towards the second half of this book was just like personal development, which to me isn't a plot that I'm going to keep reading for if I don't care about the characters, which I don't. I don't believe in any of them. I don't trust any of them. I feel like they all keep making decisions that don't seem like the characters that were set up in the original book. I don't know. I just didn't love this one. And I don't have high hopes for book 4, unfortunately. I'm worried it will continue to be more of the same, but I will give book 4 a go and hopefully it's a bit different. And then last but not least is the final book I finished of the month. This is Dreams from My Father by Barack Obama. I gave this 2.5 stars. I want to preface this with a lot of the issues I think I had with this book I feel like wouldn't be an issue if this was wrote today rather than before I was born. This was wrote in 1995, well, published in 1995 originally. I was born in 1996, so this was written before I was born. And at the start of it, I don't actually know if it's in the physical because I read the physical along with the audio, but yeah, preface to the 2004 edition. So basically in this edition, like, he goes on to say himself, like, if I were to write this today, I can't remember the exact words, these aren't the exact words, but essentially there are things that I would have wrote differently, there were things that I would have edited, there were things that I could have wrote better. And that was a big part of my issue with this one. The base story, like his story, like this is him like growing up basically. Like we see aspects of his life in relation to his dad, kind of like from like a child to, I don't know, it's probably like 25-ish by the time this book ends, I'm guessing. That part of it was interesting, like it was interesting, like the base of this, like him like deciding these things, thinking these things. It was so repetitive. There were so many internal thoughts that were repeated, and there were so many like kind of like lessons learnt moments that were just kind of felt like the same lesson to me. They didn't work for me and I just had a problem with it. It felt repetitive, even though the story itself wasn't repetitive, because of what it was talking about getting from each of these interactions, each of these moments we see in each of these like life impacts. It felt repetitive, and honestly I was bored. I was bored reading it. So yeah, it's a shame because I feel like it could have been done better now. Like there's no reason why this should have been boring. I do think it's just the way it was written. So yeah, unfortunately, bit of a downer for the last book, but that was that. So yeah, those were all the books that I read this month. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry it's been a bit of a longer one. I normally try and keep these monthly wrap-ups quite short, but there was a lot of books this month. This is the most amount of books that I've read in quite a while. So yeah, I do hope you enjoyed the video. Do give it a like if you liked it. Let me know down below if there's any of these books you've read or any you want to read. Let me know your thoughts, feelings, etc. Subscribe down below if you'd like to see more like this, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye.